Welcome everybody to what I hope will be a very productive session. Most of us on this platform came to our political maturity and held our highest public office in a happier time, in the 2 decades after the end of the Cold War, the 90s and the noughties. I was Australia's Foreign Minister from 88 to 96, headed the International Crisis Group from 2000 to 2009. And to introduce our extraordinarily distinguished world leader panelists, all of whom have been committed selflessly to cooperative dialogue and to inclusive leadership through their entire careers. First of all, of course, Ban Ki-moon, Secretary General of the United Nations from 2007 to 2016. Before that, Korean Foreign Minister, 2004 to 6. Susilo Bambang YUDHOYONO, SBY, was President of Indonesia from 2004 to 14. Yukio HATOYAMA was Prime Minister of Japan, 2009 to 10. GOMBOJAV, Zandanshatar, Zandan was Mongolian Foreign Minister from 2009 to 12 and has just completed a term as Prime Minister of Mongolia last year, 25-26. And finally, Philipp RÖSLER, who was Vice-Chancellor of Germany from 2011 to 2013. Whether directly engaged or not in that time, all of us will be aware of those immediate post-Cold War decades as a time of real cooperation and great optimism about the future. Not everything went right, certainly not in the Middle East, but a great deal did, including UN peacemaking and peacekeeping, new consensus on atrocity crime response, effective counter-terrorism strategies, significant arms control, massive trade expansion, and huge poverty reduction. But as we're all acutely aware, over the last 15 years or so, and accelerating as time has gone on, we've all witnessed a serious erosion in trust and cooperation generally, in respect for international law, respect for multilateral institutions and processes, especially by the biggest powers. So what are we going to do in this panel? Well, first of all, in 2 rounds of opening questions, we're going to explore, first of all, what our distinguished leaders think are the most serious of the problems the world now confronts for our security and prosperity. And secondly, recognizing, as I hope we do, that the role of this Jeju forum is not to admire problems, but to try to contribute to their solutions. In the second round, what we're going to focus on is what our leaders believe to be the most productive strategies for actually reinventing cooperative problem solving. How do we make it happen? If time remains, recognizing the need for at least 10 minutes of questions and answers from the floor, I will then ask the leaders after the initial round some specific questions about matters of particular relevance to them. So we come to the first round question. What, each of you, worries you most about the world as you now perceive it? Is it the behavior of Russia, China, and the United States, and the associated paralysis of the Security Council? Is it the breakdown in the commitment to effectiveness of multilateral institutions generally? Is it the weakness of our collective response to the great existential risks to all of us of climate change, pandemics, nuclear holocaust? Is it the impact of digital media in encouraging dumbed-down populism and making sophisticated policy responses ever harder? Is it the emerging triumph of artificial intelligence or something else? While you might be tempted to say all of the above, what I really would like you to do in this opening presentation is focus on the 2 or 3 problems which really worry you and you think should worry all of us the most. Just one other point. While some of you will no doubt want to take this opportunity, and you're welcome to do so, to share your thoughts more generally on the forum's overarching theme, reinventing cooperation in a fragmented world, it would be, again, helpful if so far as possible we could make the primary focus of your remarks on problems to enable us to focus in the second round on solutions. Ki-moon, over to you to start. Korea's favorite son and all of our favorite sons in the United Nations. Ki-moon, over to you.
Thank you, Gareth, for raising very important questions, which we are now experiencing sadly and unfortunately. Now, I basically agree all the points which you have raised, 5 points, since you said I need to be very brief. First of all, I'd like to mention about 3 agendas, most important to my mind. Number 1, climate change crisis, how we can really address this one. Second, very disturbing, growing rivalry among major powers like the United States and European Union and some other countries. Now, thirdly, as a former Secretary General, I am deeply, deeply concerned and really worried what will happen to the future of the United Nations and international organizations. Those are 3 agendas which we must address very seriously. I really hope and I urge the political leaders of major powers to think about the future. Let me first think about climate change. I'm known as Mr. Climate because I have spent 10 years, all my passion, all my time, and all my energy to address these climate change issues, because climate change is not affecting only 1 or 2 countries. It's affecting all the countries, whether you are living in Europeans and American or Asians, or whether you are living in Africa and developing countries. It affects all of the nation. That's why I took this issue as a #1 priority of the United Nations as a Secretary General. To lead the United Nations, I know that there are at least 5 future Secretary General. You must lead by example. Normally, President and senior officials, they give order without practicing themselves. That's the worst leadership. Lead by example has been my motto and my principle. That's why, just to convince, starting from the United States and other countries, I really wanted to see for myself what is happening in this world. I visited 4 times Arctic, 1 time Antarctica, and I visited many other small developing island states where climate change was happening, exactly what was happening. So standing on the melting ice on the Arctic, I spoke out. The climate change is happening, sea level is rising, we have no time to wait, we must take action now. That has been my message. That's why I was finally relieved, happy that on December 2015, the whole world became one. They have agreed to adopt Paris Climate Change Agreement. The problem is how to implement. Making decision was very difficult. Implementation is 100 times more difficult. Now, I am deeply concerned that United States, the leader country in climate change, has withdrawn twice from this Paris Climate Change Agreement. United States is second largest greenhouse gas emitting countries. Therefore, I really urge United States return immediately. Then, I have unlimited story to tell. So I'll move to another second important issue now. This is a growing rivalry among major powers. When I say major powers, United States and European Union and China and Russia. They are not talking each other much as they did during my time at the United Nations. It's very worrisome. It's very worrisome. Now, even the relationship between the United States and European Union, NATO, that's totally different from just a few more months. Again, this is very worrisome. Again, I sincerely hope that the leaders of these major powers, they really work together, hand in hand. We must think about the future of our generations. And we must think about our future of our planet Earth, the only Earth we are now living. This is a very urgent issue. I sincerely hope that the citizens of the world, with a global vision, you must speak up. When the leaders are speaking, they only disrupt their friendly relationship. When the people of the world, like global citizens, just raise your voice individually, commonly, if your leaders are not speaking out. That's my urgent wish to you. Another one, as a former Secretary General of the United Nations, again, I am deeply, deeply worried about the weakening power and role of the United Nations and other international organizations. Not in the past. We can never say that we have always been in peace. We have been always in satisfactory situation. But what I am very angry is that the President Trump has decided to withdraw from 31 United Nations organizations, then 35 international organizations like WHO, UNESCO, and UNFCCC, and there are 66 international organizations. United Nations is not the member now. Then can they believe that they can live alone in this world without cooperation, without supporting each other? If you travel many other developing countries, particularly Africa, somewhere, least developed countries, you cannot sleep without tears from your eyes, without your broken heart. You cannot sleep. That's what I have seen for myself. Therefore, I really urge, I pray, I really appeal to the United States, please return. You are the leader. Everybody recognizes United Nations as a leader. If a leader is not participating, who can do it? I sincerely hope that if there's any American citizens, please raise your voice, and our global citizens, through this forum, I hope we speak up. So let us work together. My message has been that United States is the most powerful, resourceful country, but my experience tells not a single country in this world can live alone without working together with other neighboring countries, members of the international community. So I'll just stop here and leave it to another members. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Ban Ki-moon. SBY, Indonesian President, your perspective.
Thank you, Mr. Gareth Event. Australia is a close neighbor of Indonesia and also a strong partner for us. I am very much concerned on two things. Number one, the return of great power rivalry, great power politics. I am in line with my good friend Ban Ki-moon on this issue. And number two is the decline of multilateralisms and the rise of unilateralisms. First, on the returns of great power rivalry, we remember what was said by Thucydides long time ago. The strong do what they can, the weak suffer what they must. Why I'm looking for specifically the great powers? We know that great power possesses enormous power, veto power in the UN system, strong economy, strong military power, strong technology, and so on and so on. If in pursuing and defending its national interests, great power does not respect international law, UN Charter, even law of warfare, Geneva Conventions, so the world will be in trouble. And actually, we need the roles to play by the United Nations. And we are seeing our world now that great powers can set up the games in many parts of the world. So somehow, and we could discuss further, how to, I should not say control, how to ensure that great powers in pursuing their national interests not cross the red lines. That's my first point. Second point is about the rise of unilateralisms, country first, and the decline of togetherness of all countries and nations in the world. Why it is not good? Because if we are not having strong collaboration, strong multilateralisms, so in tackling the critical and important global agenda, such as combating climate change, reducing poverty across the globe, preventing pandemics to happen in the future, and probably avoiding confrontation and big wars to come in the future. I should say that our task, our global mission will be much more difficult. So once again, there must be a way how to stop the continuing decline of multilateralisms, collaborations, and to stop the rise of ultranationalisms and also unilateralisms. That's my short point on that. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Hatoyama-san, your perspective.
Thank you. What worries me most in the current world is the loss of the spirit of fraternity, or UI, among people. For many years, I have advocated the philosophy of UI fraternity. Fraternity is an ideology that respects both one's own dignity and freedom, as well as the dignity and freedom of others. Simply put, it is a spirit of mutual respect, mutual understanding, and mutual assistance. In other words, friendship is built on independence and coexistence. By striving for independence, your dignity is respected. However, you must not live alone. You must understand that you are different from others. Rejoice and help each other as you live. It's not dependence, but symbiosis. Fraternity is an ideal that exists not only between people, between regions, and even between nations. Furthermore, in terms of coexistence with nature, it can also be said to exist between humans and nature. Unfortunately, with events like genocide in Gaza, the war between Russia and European countries in Ukraine, and attacks on Iran by the US and Israel, it is hard not to believe that leaders have lost the ideals of fraternity. If a country's leader shows respect for the dignity of another nation, it will lead to efforts to resolve all issues through dialogue, and war should be prevented. Especially in recent years, in recent wars, AI has been heavily utilized, and unmanned drone weapons controlled by AI have caused significant damage. I believe it is necessary to instill some ethical standards in AI. Moreover, the progression of global warming is destroying coexistence with nature. If I were to mention just one thing, it would be that the attacks on Iran by Prime Minister Netanyahu and President Trump were a clear violation of international law. As a result, the blockade of the Strait of Hormuz has been carried out, which has had a significant impact on Japan as well. Prices have already soared, causing significant delays in construction and civil engineering projects. I welcome the historic dialogue talks between the United States and Iran in Switzerland. I hope that substantial progress is made there. I sincerely hope that Israel will also take part in this process. Pakistan has made tremendous efforts as a mediator in the Iran war, but I believe that Japan, which has maintained friendly relations with both the United States and Iran, should have made mediating efforts from a fraternal standpoint. In that sense, it was just a clear mistake that Prime Minister Takaichi took a Trump-aligned stance and responded critically to Iran. That is what I wanted to say. Thank you.
Thank you very much, HATOYAMA-san. Now, Zandan, Mongolian perspective. Over to you.
From Mongolia. Thank you, Gareth. Thank you, Gareth. Let me begin with a historical question about this very island, Jeju. Do you know the historical linkage between Mongolia and Jeju during the another times of fragmented world? History doesn't repeat itself, but it foreseen. The connection between our two countries goes back almost 800 years. We first came together in 1218. Korean historical memory records what can be described as a brotherhood alliance sealed with a pledge that I find moving even today. It says, "May our two nations be brothers for eternity, and may this oath of alliance made today never be forgotten by generations to come." That long historical memory gives our conversation here deeper meaning. As my brother Chairman Kim Suk describes, in 1273, in the 13th century, after a combined Goryeo-Mongolia force suppressed this Sambucho rebellion, the Mongol Yuan dynasty regarded Jeju as a strategically important location and established the Tamna administration on Jeju Island and placed it under the direct rule through officials known as Dargach. I recall this for a reason that speaks directly to our team. Genghis Khan founded and produced something what historians call Pax Mongolica, or the Mongol Peace. The Pax Mongolica was a period of unprecedented Eurasian connectivity spanning in 13th and 14th centuries. It linked distant regions, stabilized continental trade, security routes, and enabled the vast transformative exchange of goods, technologies, and cultures. For all its hard edges, it was in this way connected world. And this small island was one of the crucial meeting points during that time. So there is a real significance in our gathering on Jeju once more, 8 centuries later, to ask how we might reconnect a world that is once again growing apart. We are living through a period of real uncertainty, geopolitical tension, long conflicts, climate stress, technology moving faster than our rules, and supply chains fracturing. Underneath all of it, trust between nations is thinning. However, even as the world grows more divided, it has never been more interconnected. Our problems travel faster than our politics, and no single nation can solve them alone. Very often, those with the least resilience carry the greatest burden, and common people pay high price of inflation worldwide. Therefore, reinventing cooperation in fragmented world requires moving past rigid traditional multilateralism. Multilateralism remains essential, but multilateralism alone is no longer sufficient. When global consensus is paralyzed by geopolitical competition, more flexible forms of cooperation become necessary. Multilateral partnerships can bring together countries and stakeholders around specific challenges such as clean energy, critical minerals, resilient supply chains, and AI governance without waiting for universal agreement. Strategic trust must be rebuilt. In an era of economic decoupling and growing uncertainty, countries and institutions must honor commitments even when broader political interests diverge. Transparency, accountability, and fair burden sharing remain essential for sustaining cooperation. Local partnership matters more than ever. Cities, regional governments, and private companies are often able to move faster than national governments in areas such as sustainability, innovation, and digital transformation. Artificial intelligence presents both opportunities and risks. International cooperation is needed not only to accelerate innovation, but also establish ethical norms and common standards to ensure technology benefits society as whole. Cooperation can no longer be driven by governments alone. Scientists, businesses, humanitarian organizations, universities, young people must all be part of this solution. Small countries, middle powers can play pivotal role in the world events, and in the end, moral leadership is more powerful than any weapon. For countries like Mongolia, cooperation is not the ideal, it is a practical necessity.
Thank you, Zandan. That's a pretty impressive wish list. And finally, in this first round, for a European perspective, Philipp RÖSLER. Philipp.
Yeah, thank you, Gareth. Ladies and gentlemen, please allow me first to explain one thing. So when Gareth was so kind to introduce me as a former Federal Vice-Chancellor of Germany, he was true, but I could see it in your eyes that you have some doubt why I'm looking so Asian. So the reason is, I was born once in Vietnam, still during the war. Then I was adopted to Germany, grew up in Germany and make a political career for a couple of years until the voter decided differently in Germany. So I'm literally, as you mentioned, Asian-European cooperation. So on that note, I think Gareth was asking what is worrisome. Certainly we are living, and it was mentioned already from my fellow colleagues here, in a fragmented world. So geopolitical rivalry, economic uncertainty, everything was mentioned. And what politicians now do is they look more or less on their own country first and foremost. That's the reason why they're elected for. but this is then maybe too nationalistic and less global. At the end, it's good if they talk about more security, more independency, resilience on a national level is great as long as you don't mix up resilience with isolation. Because in today's time, it's good to be more self-confident as a country, independent of course, but you should not forget, and it was also raised, the challenges are still global. Secretary General Ban Ki-moon just mentioned it. Climate change cannot be addressed only on a national level, not even on a regional level. Pandemic, we all experience it. A virus which causes a pandemic is never asking for a visa application on any border. Global cyber threats in the era of digitalization and AI don't ask even for anything, but they will take everything if we not be cautious. So we need certainly global cooperation. And let's face it, I mean, we don't want to complain. We should end up here out of the panel optimistic. That was a appeal of Gareth. And that means certainly in today's time, global cooperation is possible. It might have changed as the situation has changed. And we have to learn to become more practical, more flexible, more agile. And I'm deeply convinced that one region or even nation can compete in a fair competition with another nation or region, but at the same time, they can cooperate in many other areas. So our job to do is, or your job to do as leaders, to define the different areas where we can have fair competition and where it's an urgent need for still global cooperation. I think this is the main message. And I mean, yeah, we're living in a fragmented world, but our job is to make sure that we never become a divided world. And I think on that note, I will keep it as such and say, look, let's focus on what Gareth was asking for, some solutions. And one solution is, I mean, we are here, right? I mean, this is a podium bringing people together, first to talk, and allow me this to mention as well. Politicians always say, oh, we have to talk to each other, which is true. But half of the rent is also to listen to each other. So talking and listening is good for global cooperation. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Philipp. Well, coming now to the second round of questions, most of you have identified with real clarity and force some of the biggest problems we're facing: the breakdown of multilateralism, the issue of climate change and other existential risks which we're not responding to very effectively, the inability to curb the overreach of some of our biggest countries who are behaving in the most irresponsible ways. So turning from the identification of those problems to productive ways forward, if we're going to reinvent international cooperation, if we're going to effectively tackle the major problems, what do we actually do about it? Can the United States, China and Russia be pressured or encouraged to change their spots under their current leadership? Or do we just have to wait them out? Is there going to be any point in Ban Ki-moon making the kind of passionate plea that he did to the Trump administration to reverse course on those 66 international institutions from which he's withdrawn? If that's not going to work, gentle persuasion, what is with the big guys? What, if anything, can we do to overcome the amnesia about the horrors of the non-cooperative past that seem to afflict so many of our policymakers and publics? Do answers lie, as Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney argued so forcefully at Davos, with the world's middle powers? And I guess nearly all of us on this platform would identify our own countries as middle powers. Does the answer lie in us stepping up more energetically, building both multilateral and minilateral coalitions for effective action? Does the answer lie, as the Slovenian president said in her contribution this morning, on some new institution bringing together like-minded, decent middle power countries? Or is that just chasing a will-o'-the-wisp? So these are the issues I would like you to come back to in the second round of responses. Ki-moon?
Since I have spoken extensively, I'll try to be brief. If we study history, there is a clear answer. When you cooperate with neighbors and some other global, countries, then it always produced peace, prosperity, and even eternal. There cannot be an eternal peace, but quite significantly long peace. But when you act alone, just believing your own power, then there has always been problems. This is one may gain short-term gain, but short-term gain doesn't make any difference at this time. I am very much conscious of criticism about the multilateralism, when multilateralism means that finger point comes to the United Nations. So I am very much conscious of all these issues. As while working as a Secretary General, I really try to do my own effort to reform the United Nations. I think I cannot just talk about myself, but many people regard me as reform-minded, and I really try to change the way UN staff and member states have been working. But I could not change the way the member states were doing. I could only do the member UN staff. So I've been trying to change the people and change rotational basis, etc., etc. But that seems to have not been much successful as the criticisms are continuing. At this time, I know that we have 5 candidates for future UN jobs and 1 more. I understand she's not participating. But in any way, one should have a longer vision how United Nations can be further supported, further strengthened, so that they can do much more work. United Nations, by any standard, historically speaking and currently speaking, the only most authoritative international organization which can deliver the what international community really wants. And therefore, I am really urging, particularly big powers. Now, it's not only big organizations like the United Nations or NATO or whatever, but there are some medium group of countries. I think, Gareth, you know very well, like MICTA, medium countries like Mexico, Indonesia, Korea, Turkey, or Australia, they have established a MICTA. And there are ASEAN. ASEAN has been playing very effective role. They have first established ASEAN. They thought that only ASEAN 5, at the time 5 countries, cannot do it. Therefore, they increased to have Japan, Korea, China, ASEAN plus 3. Then later, even ASEAN plus 3 would not be sufficient enough. They expanded East Asian Summit, much bigger, including United States. Then one day there was some, including European Union into Asian group, but that lasted short term. Unfortunately, when I was Vice Minister, we had worked very hard to bring European Union together, working with ASEAN. This was called ASEM, Asia-Europe Summit Meeting, but that was short-lived. In any way, there are many, many ideas which we can strengthen, not only the United Nations, but medium group countries. Therefore, I really urge that we work more creatively, more harmoniously, and more, rather than short term, work for the longer term. This is my, my idea based on my own experiences. I have been dealing with the United Nations, ASEAN, and small group like MICTA and whatever. So we need to think very seriously that not a single country can live alone. We have to really work together. That's, as I told you already, hard lessons which we must not forget. We have moral and political duties, obligations that we must leave our planet Earth to our succeeding generations. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Ki-moon, you emphasized in your response then the utility of some of the existing dialogue mechanisms like the East Asia Summit and so on. What's your view of the proposition that we heard from the Slovenian president this morning about the desirability of a wholly new institution of like-minded sort of middle powers? Do you think, we've heard this story before with the talk about a global collaboration of democracies. Do you think there's any utility in that kind of thinking out of the box, or are we better devoted to just trying to improve the existing institutions, quintessentially the UN itself? I'm asking Ki-moon as a follow-up question. I was asking you just as a follow-up. Do you want to respond now, or we'll come back to you later? Well, okay, let's move to SBY, and I want to ask you later about ASEAN specifically, but more generally on solutions. Please respond now, SBY.
Yes. Firstly, I would like to go back to the main concern of many, the return of great power politics. We remember in international relations, even in domestic politics, there is one important principle. Power must not go unchecked. Power must be checked by other power. When it comes to all great powers can do almost everything that they want to do it. And we realize as well that the United Nations, our house, our home, and other international architecture are powerless in the sense they cannot prevent all that bad things that happen because of the unilateralisms done by great powers. I am thinking, Gareth, probably we need a kind of coalition of the willing, coalitions of the middle power to balance the world situation when great powers are so dominant in world affairs. For example, if great powers in the regions, Korea, Japan, Australia, Indonesia, and also ASEAN as a one entity, can do more, can say something and do something, it will be better to ensure that the rivalry between US and China will not cross the line. The voice is very important. I also watched statement made by Prime Minister Carney of Canada in Davos. Remember, I was also watching President Trump's speech at length, and the issue of the ideas to impose more tariff for Europe, and the issue of Greenland takeover. And after many leaders of middle power spoke out at the forum, then the situation is changing. I do not know exactly why President Trump changed his mind. Could be the voice of leaders of middle power matters on that connections. And I remember in 2011, Indonesia was the host of East Asia Summit, attended by all ASEAN countries, 3 countries as dialogue partners, China, Japan, and Korea, and also Russia and the United States. As a host, as a chair, I was receiving conflicting messages. Beijing asked me not to discuss about South China Sea dispute. Washington asked me to put South China dispute into agenda because it's not economic forum like APEC. So East Asia Summit should discuss all things that connected to the region, Asia Pacific region. And of course, I put on summit agenda the dispute over South China Sea from constructive perspective. So, to me, without conversation, without dialogue, we cannot ensure that unnecessary things can be prevented, can be avoided when it comes to the dispute between claiming state in the region. So there are many examples that I think, once again, middle power must speak out, must say more, must do more, because if all countries, all nations are silent, and United Nations, Mr. Ban Ki-moon, is not able to impose UN Charter and international law, I think the world is in a great danger. That's my view on this issue. So once again, all middle power leaders, please speak out. You have to balance in order we could maintain world order and international peace and security.
Thank you very much. Hatoyama-san, your perspective on solutions. What can work?
Thank you. Europe, once plagued by fierce wars, was born from the ideals of fraternity into pan-Europeanism, forming the coal and steel community, which eventually reached the EU, making Europe effectively a non-war community. When considering this theme, rebuilding cooperation in a divided world, I want to lead East Asia as one open community, one that will never experience war again, based on the principle of fraternity. Because we believe that what was done in Europe can be done in East Asia. The concept of an East Asian community based on fraternity is by no means something that can be realized overnight. However, precisely because fragmentation deepens, a long-term vision based on dialogue, cooperation, and mutual respect is necessary. To that end, I would like to propose 3 directions. First, the institutionalization of dialogue on history and security. Rather than avoiding memories of conflict, by creating ongoing dialogue opportunities involving experts and younger generations, we can gradually reduce distrust caused by not knowing the other person. Second, expanding collaborative projects on common challenges. East Asia should promote joint research, joint funds, and human resource exchanges to address cross-border issues such as climate change measures, energy transition, infectious disease control, marine environmental conservation, and ethical use of digital technologies. A sense of community is not born from abstract slogans, but from concrete experiences of sweating together. Third, there is a dramatic expansion of interactions between young people and citizens, increasing opportunities for younger generations to learn, work, and create alongside peers from other countries, such as exchange programs, volunteering, internships, and stand-up collaborations forms the foundation of long-term trust. Fraternity is something learned through encounters, not textbooks. The East Asian community is not an exclusive regional bloc, but a framework for promoting dialogue, mutual understanding, and cooperation. Now is the time for us to move away from a zero-sum security perspective and develop the concepts of common security, cooperative security, and comprehensive security. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Well, thank you, Hatoyama-san, for that very focused list of specific suggestions, which I think will help guide our further discussion. Zandan, you expressed a little bit of optimism before that a lot of these problems were soluble. Can you continue to hold to that note in your comment now on solutions, or are you going to be a bit more pessimistic?
Okay, I think that waiting for a change of major power leadership is too much of a passive strategy. The more productive path is for middle powers to step into the vacuum the major powers have left, not to challenge them, but to carry forward the work they are too divided to do. Initiatives like the Jeju Forum for Peace and Prosperity serve as critical incubators for this kind of action. They allow middle powers, international organizations, and civil society to bridge divides, formulate joint strategies, and push a multilateral agenda. Let me suggest 3 ways we can break the current gridlock. The first is to build targeted mini-lateral coalitions, not broad treaties that take a long time, but compact, focused groups of 5 or 10 countries formed to solve a single problem. MICTA partnership is one of the examples: Mexico, Indonesia, Korea, Turkey, and Australia. So countries like Korea can co-write the rules where the great powers are stuck in AI safety, on semiconductor supply chains, on linking carbon markets and green technology. These coalitions are to set global standards without waiting for universal agreement. The second is economic statecraft, using trade itself intelligently as leverage. We can diversify supply chains across a broader range income nations so that no single power holds a choke point. We can tie market access to compliance with international law and basic standards so that openness rewards good behavior. Third speaks to the amnesia you named. Our universities, our civil society, and middle powers themselves have real work to do. Shared regional history, honest education, and making the economic price of past nationalism tangible. People defend cooperation, then they can see plainly what its absence costs them. Middle powers cannot replace the great powers, but we can refuse to wait for them. And in refusing to wait, we keep cooperation alive until they are ready to return to it. Also, we need to start discussions about multilateral and financial institutions. Also, we need to discuss about the reform of multilateral institutions, financial institutions.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
A lot of enthusiasm about middle power, minilateralism, and coalition building. Philipp, does any of this resonate with you in a European context? Can you carry on from where you left off at the end of your first remarks and give us some solutions?
Yeah, I'm not sure I can give some solutions, but at least to answer your question. And again, you ask for optimism. And for the few Germans here in the audience, I'm still member of my party in Germany, so there is no stronger proof for my optimism if you see their polls. And I do this because I'm convinced that the truth is always stronger than the lie. Unfortunately, it's not always as fast and as loud as the lie. If you were asking if people leaving multilateral organizations, then they leave it. You cannot stop them. We would say in Germany, don't cry crocodile tears. They will leave. But what you can do is, you can first do things. First, create some alternatives. As you mentioned, the call from Mark Carney in Davos, the call for middle power. However, this is only a promise that with this community it will become better. And better than a promise is a proof. And if they leave multilateral organizations, or pull out to some extent, we should take it serious for a moment to listen. Even it sounds crazy, sometimes even the most crazy statement, there is some truth in it. And it's good to listen. And that leads then, maybe there's sort of need for reforms of the multilateral organization and bodies, right? I mean, we have here all the candidates running for the Secretary General of the UN, so maybe they can think also what they are promising then of reforms, and reform should be related to have impact. When we just discussed the global threats, like climate change, pandemics, cyber threats, then you can gain back members, middle powers and superpowers, if the multilateral organizations can prove that they have a positive impact on the challenges we all have addressed. I think this would be a great way to do things. First, to reform multilateral bodies. Second, to gain back the superpowers and partners on top of the middle powers. And at the end, we are back there, what we asked at the beginning, sort of global cooperation. It sounds easy, of course, and I know it's way more difficult, but I think this could be also seen as an opportunity. If you see someone is leaving, maybe it's also sort of some minor mistake on our end, and to improve ourselves is always a good idea.
Good, thank you. Let me come to a third round now, in which I'll ask each of you some quite specific questions that are more directly related to your own immediate experience. Starting with you, Kim Moon. When it comes to the restoring the effectiveness of the United Nations at all levels, how much difference does the Secretary General personally, realistically, how much difference is he or she capable of making? You said you tried to lead by example, and that's a pretty important consideration. I think we would all agree. But tell us, and this is particularly interesting in the light of the next session we're going to have, what do you think are the most important criteria governing the choice of the next Secretary General now underway? What criteria should we be taking most seriously, looking to most importantly? That's really putting you on the spot, but that's your job.
That's very easy to ask, but very difficult for me to answer, because I have been, during the 10 years time, and even after my retirement, I have been cornered and questioned. What did you do at the United Nations? Why did you make all this situation like this way? This is really embarrassing, sometimes very difficult for me. I have been always cornered. So basically, I'm a very polite person, but I normally don't argue with many other people. But sometimes, while working as a Secretary General, I was worried about myself. Am I changing my character, the speaking out, doing some hard work, you know? This is a real, real experience which I have been. So, but normally people call Secretary General like secular pope or even president of the world. Never, even not very least, approach, that kind of approach. That's something very embarrassing for Secretary General, because we have at least 5 future Secretary General's candidate, but we need to be very practical. But Secretary General must have moral courage. Moral courage. We don't have, Secretary General doesn't have any hard power. We don't have any military. We don't have any weapons or whatever, money. So we are all supported by the UN member state. Now we always depend upon the laws, regulations, particularly international law, and United Nations Charter. That's the basis of what UN Secretary General and UN staff, hardworking UN staff, are depending upon. This is really a big and embarrassing for me all the times. But what I have been believing is that while even with the moral power, I have been speaking out very seriously, very strongly, whenever I have seen some human rights abuses, and when the leaders were not doing exactly what they should do as elected members, particularly in many developing countries, I've been really fighting, unlike my character, raising my voices. So I've been speaking to my senior advisors, raise your voice, challenge your leaders. This has been my repeated order. Raise your voice, challenge your leaders. What have you been doing based on such and such regulations, etc., etc.? So my relationship with some presidents are very good, but with some dictator type leaders, very bad, very bad. So I really wanted to embrace them all the times, and I never missed regional summit meetings like African summit meeting or Middle East summit meeting, etc., because that's the place where I could appeal to the leaders directly, because I could not meet one by one all the times, even though I'm the most traveled Secretary General on record. But I could not travel all the countries in this world, all member states. I could not meet all the leaders. That's why I have used media. I have used my personal contact, and this has been my experience, based on my experience. But now, looking at now, at this time, as I said previously, I am much, much more worried and concerned and even angrier by seeing what is now happening in the most developed, most powerful countries. Now, big powers, they always try to use some forcible means. This is not the way we can solve all the problems. There are many, many difficult issues. Therefore, it is always important to sit down together, listen carefully, what the challenges are, what the problems are of the people. So I've been speaking to listen to the voices of the people. That has been my message. So I don't have any other things to add. I become even emotional. If you ask me more questions, I'll become angrier even. More than emotional, now angrier now. So let me be a calm and good person now. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Ki Moon. I'm not sure that your prescriptions are the best guarantee of a second term as Secretary General, but there's certainly an admirable set of prescriptions for making the office really matter at this difficult time, and I hope our candidates have been listening very carefully to what you just said. And may you stay impolite and may you stay angry, because we certainly need both in the current environment. But SPY, coming to you now, and let's focus a little bit more narrowly on your immediate neighborhood. What can be realistically done to improve ASEAN's impact and effectiveness, both in resolving internal problems like Myanmar and meeting external challenges like Chinese behavior in the South China Sea? Would just one specific thing you might be interested in answering, would further dilution of the consensus rule help? And is that realistically capable of being achieved?
Well, There are many talkings about ASEAN and also many critical questions. Is ASEAN still relevant? Is ASEAN truly united? Does ASEAN have the common grounds on many issues? The answer is, to me, yes, ASEAN is still relevant, with the hope that ASEAN should do the right things and do the things rightly. ASEAN, in my view, is relatively united. And on many issues, actually, we have same position, common ground, but one or two issues. With that, I should say that ASEAN is not perfect, but for almost 6 decades, we have been able to preserve peace and stability in the Southeast Asia. We know that Southeast Asian region is one of the world's most diverse region. Many ideologies, different politics, different history, and so on and so on. But we are able to maintain our cohesion and able to be part of the progress and solution in the region. Uh, Talking about consensus building principles that many may think ASEAN will be less flexible because of that principles. Actually, we have new ASEAN Charter. On the one hand, we maintain our consensus building culture and also the principle of non-interference. There is still in our chapter. But number two, with our ASEAN New Charter, actually, ASEAN member countries must respect human rights, democracy, and the rule of law. So actually, leaders of ASEAN can combine, can put in a nice balance between the two, the principle of non-interference with the imperative of ASEAN to adopt universal norms such as the rule of law, democracy, and human rights issue. I'll give you one example in dealing with Myanmar, our housekeeping issue, home affairs. Actually, and I have to say, firstly, that Myanmar is a delicate and complex issue. But in the past, I had a good conversation with the then leader of Myanmar in 2005, first in Jakarta, second in Yangon. I have a productive talk with Senior General Tan Shui. I was listening to him. What is the perspective of Myanmar? He said to me, for Myanmar, the most important thing is to maintain national unity and to preserve territorial integrity. My response was, I remember, well, Indonesia, ASEAN support fully your objective to maintain your unity and also your national integrity, territorial integrity, I mean. But you have promised already, my good friend, that Myanmar will go ahead with 7 steps to democracy. And once again, Indonesia and ASEAN will also support you on your endeavor to conduct democratization in your country. You can choose your timeline, your step to be done, and we will support it. So this kind of approach mattered. And Indonesia continues to be a friend of Myanmar, and history told us there is nice election and so on and so on. So actually, ASEAN must continue to persuade Myanmar to go ahead to reach their objective, but to respect ASEAN Charter when it comes to democracy and the rule of law. If one example, when we are talking about Myanmar. Second example, I think on South China Sea dispute. Well, the position of single countries of ASEAN not really the same, but we have a common ground, a common say. We tell our brother China in solving the problems of South China Sea dispute. Number one, we have to negotiate peacefully, respect international law, and not using military power. ASEAN must say that continuously, again and again, and loudly. And of course, there are other mechanisms, 6-point principles, COC, DOC, COC, and so on, so on. But in essence, we want to build awareness and commitment to solving problems of South China dispute while ensuring that China and ASEAN can work together in maintaining peace and security. When it comes to US-China rivalry, I do hope to my colleague, the current leaders of ASEAN member countries now, ASEAN can be a bridge builder, can talk to both China and the US, no obstacle at all, and ensure that US and ASEAN once again can be part of the solution and progress for the future of Asia. Thank you.
Hatayama-san, I'm trying to allow a little bit of time for questions from the audience, but we are running out. But nonetheless, I want to ask each of the remaining three of you some specific questions. Hatayama-san, what more can be done, in your judgment, to defuse tensions over Taiwan? Will your Japanese current Prime Minister Takaichi has spelt out a rather harder line on this issue, at the same time as President Trump seems to be softening the United States position. Does that harder line from your country help or hinder what is realistically capable of being achieved with cross-strait peace?
Okay, thank you. In response to a question at the Budget Committee about the Taiwan contingency, Prime Minister Takaichi responded that it could lead to an existential crisis, mentioning the possibility of using collective self-defense to cooperate with US forces supporting Taiwan to fight China. This statement clearly contradicts the 1972 Japan-China joint statement. In the Japan-China joint statement, the Japanese government fully understood and respected Taiwan as an inseparable part of the territory of the People's Republic of China and pledged to implement the position of Article 8 of the Potsdam Declaration, that is, the provisions of the Cairo Declaration. This means that by allowing Japan to return stolen Taiwan and other assets to the Republic of China, the Japan-China Joint Communique acknowledged the government of the People's Republic of China as the sole legitimate government, thereby recognizing Taiwan as part of the PRC. Therefore, the Japanese government is supposed to not to support Taiwan's independence. Takaichi's remarks imply supporting Taiwan's independence together with the United States, which contradicts the Japan-China Joint Communique. It is understandable that the Chinese government is furious. Normally, Prime Minister Takaichi should have immediately retracted her remarks and apologized. However, the Japanese public opinion is swayed by the China threat narrative, and the likelihood of Takaichi changing his changes her previous statements seems extremely low. At the very last, the Japanese government should have informed China that it will uphold the Japan-China Joint Communique and especially that it does not support Taiwan's independence. However, it's unclear whether the Chinese side will be satisfied with this. Improving the worst Japan-China relations is an urgent task to lead East Asia toward peace. To put it simply, in the Taiwan Strait, it is necessary to strengthen confidence-building measures such as crisis management mechanisms and military hotlines, as well as to advance broader regional security dialogue. I believe that taking that step toward establishing a nuclear weapon-free zone in Northeast Asia and resuming the six-country talks among South Korea, North Korea, Japan, China, Russia, and the United States will directly lead to easing tensions in the Taiwan Strait. When I met with former President Moon Jae-in last December, there was also a strong agreement on the need to promote this initiative. Building frameworks to reduce dependence on nuclear weapons and enhance mutual trust contributes to long-term regional stability.
Well, you've left us lots more to discuss, but we've only have 5 minutes left, and I do want to give Zandan and Philipp an opportunity to comment briefly on a couple of current issues. On the nuclear issue, Mongolia has been very strong for a very long time on nuclear non-proliferation and disarmament. How seriously do you worry about breakout from Republic of Korea and from Japan, notwithstanding HATOYAMA's position or the current Prime Minister of Korea's position? Nonetheless, there is sentiment within each country. Do you worry about that? What can be done to avert it? Just a couple of minutes.
Okay, so you know, Gareth, after 4 weeks of negotiations at the UN headquarters in New York, the 11th review conference of the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty ended without consensus on final declaration. Mongolia will continue to advocate the nuclear weapon-free zone within this non-proliferation treaty process, though the negotiations on NPT have been stalled for many years, for 16 years. The major ongoing conflicts or treaties around the world are related to nuclear weapons in one way or another. Therefore, we must make progress on NPT negotiations. Unfortunately, even countries in one region are not ready to move ahead for safer world, ensuring the international security. If I had to compress all my worries into one, it is force majeure or superior force, like nuclear disaster from to natural disasters. All, in my opinion, collective karma of the humankind, and if natural disaster, from nuclear disaster to natural disasters will face humankind, it is a main worry of, must be main worry of humankind. That is why we need to reinvent our cooperation for better future of the world, future generations.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Gareth.
Thank you, Zandan. And Philippe, finally, in just a couple of minutes, a very big question, but given the absence, clearly, of serious United States commitment in Europe now, how effectively can the EU and Europe's NATO members cooperate in building effective defense against further possible Russian military adventurism? This is the big question on everyone's mind. How much can you do without the US?
As all good political decisions, I think they will start with accepting the reality. And the reality is the US will pull out in defense. So, and they have to realize they have to take care of themselves And exactly listening to President Trump, he has a point, and by the way, Obama said the same thing even before in his tenure, that Europe is living from the military protection from the US in the NATO, and now it was surfaced, and we have to accept this reality. And so that's the reason why all the governments across the European Union try to enlarge their military expenditure in their budgets, but also it's not only a question of money, it's also competence, command structure, so it's not totally trivial, but they realize they have to do something. The only problem is with Europe from time to time, they always say, oh, there's a wake-up call. We have seen so many wake-up calls, but then there's someone always there pressing the snooze button. So I hope that at the end, they will realize now they have to come into action. Political decision means not only accepting the reality, but also listen, making decision, and come into action. So the last point is now the most important point, but I'm optimistic that they are now revamping not only up their budget, but also come into action by creating a stronger military presence of the European Union. There's no other way.
Well, we've run out of time. Thanks so much to our distinguished panelists. You've given us a lot to think about, a lot to talk about. Please join me in thanking them for a wonderful session.
Thank you. Thank you very much for the inspiring discussion. Why don't we give another big round of applause to our esteemed leaders. Thank you very much once again for a discussion. And also, may I invite all our leaders to the front of the stage for a commemorative photograph to record this precious moment. Let's take a photo before we wrap up this session. Thank you very much once again for your cooperation. Thank you very much to mark these meaningful discussions on reinventing cooperation in the fragmented world. So we will take a commemorative photograph to record this precious moment. Thank you very much. I will invite all our esteemed leaders to join us in front of the stage for a commemorative photo. So face towards camera, just a little smile for the successful forum. So would you please, we will take one more photo as we upload to celebrate this gathering. Thank you. So we'll take a commemorative photograph one more time as we upload. Yes, they are now still discussing the stage. Okay. Thank you, thank you. We'll invite you. Okay, thank you very much. We'll take a photo one more time as we applause to celebrate this moment. Looking at the camera for the best photo. Thank you. Thank you very much. To our distinguished participants, thank you very much. I would like to wrap up this World Leaders session. And I would like to invite all our distinguished guests attending the VIP luncheon to make your way to the Diamond